Thank you for joining us. We have a fantastic program lined up, and we're excited to have with us to kick off this afternoon's virtual summit a talented artist and storyteller, renowned singer and songwriter Tevi Burrows will lead us into this afternoon's event with an opening meditation. Tevi, you can share your camera now and unmute your mic.
Okay, let me just set a little timer. Hi, everyone. I am really excited to be here for another inspiring and informative talk. And I would just like to lead us through a quick mindfulness and meditation exercise so that we can get started and be open. I think right now we are in such a pivotal time in history, not just for our country, but for the world. And I think that it is so critical for us as women to cultivate the healing feminine energy that we possess that really has the power to change not only our families, but our communities and the world at large. So one of the ways that is so important is through mindfulness. And when we're mindful, we gain clarity, we can de-stress, we can connect not only with ourselves, but with others in such a meaningful way. So this is a quick practice that I'm going to walk you guys through that you can do anytime, shorter or longer. And it really just helps you to start your day off, start your time off, meetings off well. So I'm just going to start the timer now. And I want everybody to close your eyes. And I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose, and then you're going to hold and release through your mouth. A deep breath in through your nose, hold at the top, and release through your mouth. One more deep breath in through your nose, hold, and out through your mouth. Now with your eyes closed, I just want you to take a moment to connect with yourself, relax your eyes, your jaw, relax your shoulders, and feel it go all the way down till your tippy toes and your body is fully relaxed. And I want you to bring to mind 3 things that you are grateful for that have happened within the last 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours if you can't think of anything. Did you get a hug from your loved one? Did you get some good news? Did you have some alone time? And just bring to mind those 3 things, one after the other, until you can actually feel what you felt in that moment. And breathe in, breathe out. Gratitude is the quickest way to realize how blessed we really are. We can often get so caught up in the minutia that we forget to appreciate the things around us. So whenever you are feeling stressed or anxious or angry, just think of something that you are grateful for in this moment. And after you think about that, we're going to move on to forgiveness. So I want you to think about someone, could be a friend, a coworker, a husband, a child, the person that cut you off in traffic, someone that you kind of are feeling a little bit unpleasant towards, irritated, angry. And I want you to picture them, and I want you to say to them, I forgive you. And release it. Our bodies collect energy, and the more negative energy that you hold actually can impact your well-being, not just your mental well-being, but your physical well-being as well. So it's important that we not hold on to things, and we allow for the capacity for love and goodness to make room. And it's also important to remember that most of the time we are all just doing the best that we can. So grace and compassion is really important. Now I want to move on to the third phase, and this is a moment for us to visualize what we want to see in the future. The late Pastor Miles always said that sight shows you what is, but vision shows you what can be. And we understand that without vision, there is no way to move our lives forward, to move our country forward, to move the world forward. So think about how you want to affect change. What does that look like for you in 1 year, 2 years, 10 years? How are you going to use your gifts and your voice and your authority to affect change? Just hold that in your mind. Feel what that feels like. Breathe in, breathe out. And our final phase is to say thank you and acknowledge the divine power that is greater than ourselves, that is always working for our greater good, knowing that all of our desires and our needs are met and will be brought to fruition. And as we close, I want everyone to repeat after me. I am aware of my power, and I am using my power for the greater good. And one more time, I am aware of my power, and I am using my power for the greater good. And as we move on into the next phase of this conference, I just want everyone to keep an open mind and an open heart on how we're going to use this information and to connect with each other to make our country, our families, and this world a better place. Namaste.
Now, folks, I'll turn it over to your host for today, Darnell Osborne, CEO of Citadel Consultants Limited in the Bahamas, who's put together this wonderful event which really shines through her passion for building a stronger, more sustainable Caribbean and her commitment to women's empowerment. Darnell, you can share your camera and unmute your mic.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here this afternoon, and we welcome you to our session. Change has been the constant, and in 2020, one may almost want to believe that change is the accepted new norm. We are hearing buzz terms like embracing change and new normal and roll with the changes and the tide. It simply means that our times are unpredictable and unprecedented. Change, whether a product of COVID-19 pandemic or renewed protests against centuries-old systemic and institutionalized racism, is witnessed globally. For Caribbean countries, which have held a greater dependency on tourism than any other region in the world, this era of change is here and touching our shores. It overturned our GDP projections. It frightened off our tourists. It escalated our unemployment numbers. And it has pulled the carpet out from us in alarming fashion. What do we do with this lot in life that has been handed to us? How do we address it? We do not have the luxury of abandoning it completely. So what do we do? Our esteemed keynote speaker and our panel of presenters can give us some of the answers to these burning questions.
And now we have the privilege to welcome Therese Turner-Jones, General Manager of the Caribbean Country Department at the IDB. And more importantly, Therese has become a consistent voice, elevating the conversation of what's possible for this region. Therese has dedicated her career to creating vibrant Caribbean economies where, above all, people are happy, productive, safe, and healthy. Therese, please share your camera and unmute your mic.
First of all, I feel really privileged to be invited to make a short presentation and hopefully stimulate some discussion around the future of tourism and our region. But before I do that, I want to say that this panel is chock block of really dynamite women. And I want to first acknowledge that. We have some veterans in the tourism sector. I haven't worked with Bernice Joaquin it's been over 30 years, and it's great to be here with you, Bernice. Of course, with Joy and Darnell and Tebby, who did that amazing introduction. I think it's the first time I've been invited to this kind of webinar and I've had that experience. So I want to say congratulations, Tebby, for doing that. You may not know, and people don't know this about me, but I actually am a big practitioner of meditation and contemplative prayer. So I really value that, and yoga. So that was really wonderful. Also speaks to the range and the breadth of talent we have in this region. Today's topic is mostly about tourism. And given how important tourism is for our region, we couldn't be talking about anything as existential as our future, right? Because our future is really intertwined with this industry. It's hardly a day that has gone by in the last 4 months that there hasn't been some academic article, some news article, some researchers article, work that the IDB is doing, work that the IMF is doing, work that the World Bank is doing, UNDP, UNCTAD. Everybody has a view on tourism and the fact that COVID-19 has upended the industry in a way that the world hasn't seen before. As Darnell mentioned in her introduction, there are so many ways to describe what we're going through and what we're experiencing. And we're all experiencing it differently. We're not all having the same experience of this pandemic. And fortunately for the Caribbean, we're in a region where we've managed to flatten the curve and stem the contagion in a way that's fairly impressive, given our size, given our level of resources, given our health systems and the infrastructure around our health systems, and given the fact that we're open to the rest of the world all the time. So I think we ought to take a moment to think about that. And what is it that has caused this region to stand out in a very impressive way at this moment globally? There is no other region, a couple of countries, but not even, that has managed to, one, follow the World Health Organization guidelines. In our case, PAHO has been a major partner. Take this pandemic very seriously. And for the citizens of each of the countries in the Caribbean to actually listen to their governments, which speaks to a lot of trust that we've put in them to protect us and keep us safe. So we've been extremely fortunate as a group of people. It doesn't matter what you read, which radio you're listening to, which television station you're watching. What's happening in the rest of the world is extraordinary, not just in scale and scope, but in the fact that the leadership right now is lacking around how to end this pandemic. And the worst part, I think, for me is that this pandemic is probably just the first of many that we may experience in our future because of environmental changes, climate change, the way we've abused this planet in so many ways. But back to the topic of tourism and what are we doing? And I started out by saying that there's been a lot of research already done on this topic. I'm going to refer to a few of the data points that come out of that. For the most part, I think what we all understand and know to be true is that the impact on the Caribbean is the most severe of any region. Remember that in this region, in the Caribbean, we have 14 out of 15 of the most tourism dependent countries in the world. And so the fact that this industry, travel and tourism, has been so severely affected by this pandemic that obviously we're going to have an economic impact that's going to be commensurate with and even worse than what the health crisis is suggesting. And that's for a few reasons. It's not just because of the share of GDP that tourism contributes is huge. And if you look at a country like, if you take the Bahamas, Jamaica, and Barbados as examples, so we're ranging anywhere between 35%, a third of GDP, to half of our GDP being generated from this one industry. So that's one number to keep in mind. In terms of employment, it's equally significant in terms of how many people work in the sector and how many lives depend on tourism and tourism-related services. So that's why it's a big issue, because if there is a sudden stop, if there are no visitors, if there are no flights coming in, if the hotels are empty, if taxi drivers have no one to take anywhere, if our tourism resorts and our attractions are not being used, it means that no one's making money. And that means that there are people who are suffering grave consequences. And we know that already. In the Bahamas, employment is almost as high as 50%. Unemployment, sorry. In Jamaica, the numbers are back up in double digits, having fallen to single digits earlier this year. And in Barbados, it's having a similar impact. But that's, if you look at Spain, if you look at Italy, if you look at France, these are also big countries that have tourism as a share of their GDP that is extremely significant. So we're not the only region dealing with this. The world as a collective is dealing with it. And I think the world as a collective needs to come up with some ways to cope with what happens if the industry has to suffer for much longer. The worst part of this pandemic, of course, is we're nowhere near out of it. And so there are lots of also theories around what do we do? Try to coexist with this disease, try to live with it, hope that there's herd immunity. But we know from the scientists that all of those ideas are very complicated. And because we don't know enough about COVID-19 and long-term impact and so on, we actually have no idea where we're going to end up. So in the short term, what do we do? And I think, again, the region has been extremely sensible in approaching what do we do, from support for workers in the sector, whether it's short-term unemployment benefits or care packages in the case of Jamaica for people who've lost jobs, whatever safety net that exists throughout the Caribbean to deal with people who are unemployed, that those people be given support. And we've seen that happen country after country after country. The issue with that is it can only be a short-term measure because governments have finite budgets, and every single government in this region writ large is having issues coping with the economic fallout. Because as economic activity dries up, revenues to the public purse dry up, which puts pressure on governments to figure out how they're going to pay public sector workers, pay for government services, continue to do all the things that governments do, provide roads, the health systems, make sure that our response to this particular pandemic is the right one from a health perspective. All of that costs money, and they're all under stress. So that's another fact to take in. That while we have a serious economic fallout, at the same time, governments are trying to cope with how to continue doing business, what they normally need to do, while at the same time providing for as much mitigation as possible from the pandemic. So That doesn't sound like a very good picture, does it? But I think one of the positives of this pandemic is that we've seen governments around this region and around the world adapt very quickly to doing business in a different way. And what do I mean by that? For probably at least 3 years now, countries around this region have been trying to move to a digital platform, meaning provide more services digitally so that public services can be delivered without having to physically go into an office. Whether it's paying your taxes online or getting a driver's license online or getting your passport online, whatever public service you need to be able to access it in a way that's safe, secure, efficient, and quick, and reduce the cost to government as well. So that's been a big initiative at the Inter-American Development Bank, and the work that we do in this region is to try to get governments to deliver their services more efficiently. And what we've seen in the last, I keep saying 3 months, but it's now 4 months under this pandemic, is that a lot of government services have had to move quickly to a digital platform. Now, not every country's been able to do that because depending on where you live, take a country like Jamaica where connectivity is not equal, because if you live in metropolitan Kingston, you may have good access to broadband, but if you live in a rural area, you may not. So we also saw, as you all know, because your kids and my kid and all my nieces and nephews, they've had to switch to online learning. Now, over 200 schools in Jamaica could not switch to online learning because of connectivity issues. So what does that do? That's a digital divide that's widening between kids who really need an education and kids who couldn't get it because there was no access. So while crises tend to put us in the positions where we do dramatic things and we make a leap of faith to do things differently, this pandemic has definitely done that. And some have said countries have done in 3 months what normally would have taken them 3 years to do. So if that's possible in a crisis, it means that it's possible to do it in the absence of a crisis. And I think the same applies to tourism. So what this, and I really feel for people like Joy and Bernice and others who work on the government side of the industry, because we are now trying to think about how do we reinvent this industry to the extent that the location, our geography, which has been our blessing because we live in a very highly prized part of the world where people actually want to come and visit. We have a lot to offer. It's not just our physicality that people come for, but people come for the warmth, they come for the hospitality, they come for our music, they come for our food, and all of these aspects of tourism, which maybe we took for granted in the past, we now have to think, is there a way that we can do it differently now so that we still stay in touch with our customers and the potential visitors who, if you take a country like Barbados, even in the Bahamas, repeat visitors is a very important part of that promotional agenda for the Ministry of Tourism. How do we keep those visitors coming back even in these difficult times? Most of you know that there's been a lot of work that's gone on protocols about how to process people when they arrive on your shores. What can hotels do to make their visitors feel more safe? How can we use more digital tools to avoid contact with individuals? How do we make payments easier? If people can use apps to make payments, to take advantage of information about attractions and all that, that has to be part of the new normal for our visitors. And I don't think we're anywhere near what other things can be done to make it different. I think the most difficult part right now is coping with the short-term impact, which is the fact that the hotels are closed, people are unemployed. What do you do with the time of those workers? Is there an opportunity to retool those workers? Can workers be learning a new language at this time so that when the markets do open up, we in the Caribbean, we have an issue with not speaking many languages. This is a really good opportunity to learn Spanish, learn French, pick up another language, learn Mandarin, because we have to go where the markets are going to be in the future. And let's not waste this time, which seems like downtime. Let's use it for some other opportunity. And then there are other things that go into the tourism industry that we need to rethink. Um, the kinds of properties, the way they get their energy, how sustainable, how green, our whole transportation system. Is there a way to move to an electric mobility platform where instead of using fossil fuel driven taxis, we have a fleet of taxis that are running on electricity that could be cheaper than fossil fuels? Can we envisage a tourism in the Caribbean that's more green, that's more sustainable, that looks after our environment in a way that we hadn't conceived of before? So I think this gives us a unique opportunity to really drill down on every aspect of the supply chain for tourism. The moment the visitor arrives, what they eat, how they get to the hotel, what kind of hotels they're staying in. Can we reduce the amount of energy that we use, because maybe the way we build hotels in the future is not 100% reliant on air conditioning. And if we are using air conditioning, because we know that's not safe in COVID-19 times, is it possible to have our energy fueled by solar panels or some other form of energy? So there are a lot of issues, I think, that are on the table that would confront policymakers. And I think for people who live, for those of us who are citizens of this region, there are things we want to see. We want to see more local ingredients in the tourism products. We want to see more local foods on the menu, more local fruits, more local entertainment. Can we think about harnessing all of the musical and other talents that we have in this region to have more local content? And by the way, that would reduce our import bill, which is severely impacted by the amount of imports that services the tourism industry. So there are many, many issues across a lot of dimensions that are opened up now for us to consider. And I want to say, you know, the IDB is trying to do its part by encouraging people to think outside the box. And we have a tourism challenge going on right now that will, we're hoping to find ideas around, you know, how do we cope with this new normal? What are some new tools? How can technology help us better? And I think there are opportunities there to harness the potential of all, especially all the young minds we have in this region, to think through what we want to, how we want this industry to look. What do we want it to reflect? We want more of our identity in it. We want more of our local culture in it. And we want to make sure that the benefits accrue to the citizens of the region as much as it does to all of the multinationals and players that are currently involved in the sector. So I think it's an exciting time. It's a very difficult time, but also a time to reflect and think about how we can do things differently. I talked a lot earlier about the whole digital transformation and the revolution, but you know, there may be opportunities now for the same visitors who can't arrive to the Bahamas or Jamaica or Barbados or St. Lucia or wherever they're trying to get to experience our location through an augmented reality, virtual reality experience, right? That's one way to stay connected with the client. So show them what it's like to be in Portland, Jamaica, or in Exuma in the Bahamas through a virtual reality experience, so that by the time they get here, they want even more. I think we just have to open up our minds, think through solutions. This is not going back to the way it was before. Forget it, it's not going to happen. We have to adjust. And the digital aspect of how we adjust is going to be fundamental. And the more that we can train up tourism workers to be more adept on using digital platforms, contactless payments, forget about cash. Nobody wants to be dealing in cash when there's a global pandemic. What are those ways in which we can do things differently and better? I think I want to stop because it feels like I've been talking a long time, and it would be great to take some questions. But my bottom line would be that the future of tourism in the region has to be one that incorporates the concept of resilience. Having just experienced Hurricane Dorian almost a year ago, that's also another aspect that we need to think about. The kinds of properties, where our natural assets are, how we coexist with nature to make this industry sustainable for us in the long term. Thank you. Darnell?
Thank you, Therese. Some very sobering comments. And indeed, we need some bright new minds to help us navigate these times. I have a question for you. In light of those comments, what do you see as the future of tourism, the industry, and what are the growth sectors of the future?
So, I mean, what I just described paints a very difficult picture in the short term. But short term, we're talking, now through the end of the year, or now through, say, March of next year, because as you follow the ebbs and flows of the new cases of COVID, our major tourism market, which is the United States, they're nowhere near the end of it, right? So we have to be very careful about which visitor we invite in. And I think the industry has to be very upfront about it. And I think that, let's take the Bahamas government, for example, I think they're being very smart to say you have to be pre-tested. If you come from particular states, no, thank you. Maybe you can come visit us in 6 months' time, because other countries are doing that, right? The fact that the Canadian border is closed to Americans says a lot. The fact that European borders are closed to Americans says a lot. The fact that certain states in the U.S. are saying no, thank you. I think I read today that there are 19 states where, which state? New York is saying, hello, if you come from these states, you have to quarantine for 14 days. So I think we have to use the data that Joy and the Ministry of Tourism, they've got access to fantastic market-driven data. We have to use that information to be extremely careful about who comes in and how they're treated and what they're going to leave behind, because we can't afford to become a destination that's full of COVID-infested people. So I think that's one thing. So that's the short term, right? So if you think about a year, 2 years from now, we know that we have a product that people around the world crave, right? So that market will be there. The same way I'm craving to go to Eleuthera next month if I can get out of Jamaica. There are people outside of wherever craving for the same thing. So that demand will continue to be there because of what's special about this region and the Bahamas or Jamaica or Barbados. People just want to go. There's nothing like it. You can't experience Exuma waters anywhere else in the world. I keep telling every Jamaican I know that I love your mountains, but your beaches, they do not compare with Exuma or Eleuthera or anywhere else. And I think what's special about St. Lucia and their topography, that appeals to a certain segment. And all of the islands have something special. I mean, Barbados is an incredibly beautiful island, and it has a very peculiar history. And people want that. And Jamaica as well. I mean, Jamaica for music, for dancehall, for reggae, for all of the historical, fantastic cultural things that Jamaica has to offer. People want that, and they want to get it. And there's something about Caribbean culture that is infectious, and once you get it, you want to keep having it. So I think there is a long-term future for tourism. Obviously, we wouldn't be having this discussion if it wasn't important. But I think it's going to be different because we are living in an age where pandemics are going to become much more common. Maybe not as severe as this one, but this is really a body slam. And for us living today, it's probably the worst thing we're ever going to live through as adults, and our children are experiencing life that we didn't, right? To have to, do your studies online and your teacher on a Zoom call for a 6-year-old, that's a really complicated thing to navigate. But guess what? Our 6-year-olds and our kids who are under 21, they're used to that because they've grown up on tablets and on the internet. And in fact, for those kids, it could be that they're learning more. I mean, I've actually heard children say, we prefer this way of doing it. There are no distractions. It's you, it's the tablet or the computer or whatever you're using. And your interaction, your educational experience may actually be better in that way than sitting in a old-fashioned classroom with a blackboard, even though most classrooms now have whiteboards, but many kids in this region still do not have access to internet learning, or they don't use computers. So all of a sudden, we can expose children in this region to a different way of learning, because that's the future. Most of our work is going to be done electronically or digitally, or or interacting with real robots. So the fact that our kids got to experience that by this unfortunate event may actually put them in a better position, and they may end up being more versatile as a result, and resilient.
Yes, agreed. At the firm level, what can we contribute to creating a prosperous and sustainable future? What can we do?
Excellent question. So I think all firms, just like all governments, are experiencing a body slam, right? So if you didn't have a business continuity plan, if you have no disaster risk mitigation in your business plan, if you have no way of adjusting and pivoting in a crisis, you're probably not going to survive. What's been interesting is to see how some firms quickly adjusted to whether it was delivery of goods or delivery of services or delivery of whatever through an e-commerce platform. Like that seemed to be like the first thing that a lot of firms adjusted to. Sorry, our offices are closed. However, if you log into this site, or if you wanted to get these services, this is what we can do, and we can have it delivered to you. They all pivoted to something different. For those that didn't, like for the supermarkets, for example, that offered curbside pickup or internet ordering of your groceries, I'm going to still go back to those supermarkets because I like that way of doing business. So I think every single firm should, if they haven't already, should have made this leap. And that's why I mentioned sometimes it takes 3 years to do that leap, but you had to do it in 3 months because you couldn't survive, right? And maybe you had to lay off a couple of staff, or maybe a lot of your staff. And for people like me, I've been working from home. This is now, let me look at my calendar. This is my 18th week of working from home, because the IDB went to a virtual platform on March 16th. So we've been working from home all of that time, but we've been doing our work fairly seamlessly, still staying in contact with our clients. And actually, we've had to help some of our clients, government entities, with their ability to work with us by providing laptops or helping out on how to do this thing digitally, because while some countries were able to do it seamlessly, and some agencies within countries, others weren't, because they just weren't ready.
Thank you so much, ladies. As always, we've gotten a ton of questions, and unfortunately, we're not going to have the time to take them all. But we want to thank you, Therese, for your contribution. And I'm going to go ahead. You can go ahead and unshare your camera and your mic,
Okay.
and I'll transition over to the panel and go ahead and introduce the panel. Darnell, you can unshare your camera as well.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us, Therese. Next in our panel discussion, we bring to you 3 women who have just been doing amazing work for tourism in this region and who have been instrumental in building 2 of the fastest growing tourism destinations in recent years. These 3 women have been faced with the monumental task of pivoting at this historical moment in order to keep their industry alive and vibrant so it continues to be a factor of their country's success. From the Bahamas, we welcome Joy Gibberlew, Director General at the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism, and Vernice Joaquin, President and CEO of the Nassau Airport. And from the Cayman Islands, we welcome Rosa Harris, Director of Tourism at the Cayman Islands Department of Tourism. Ladies, you can share your cameras and unmute your mics.
Sorry, I'll get used. I would like to thank and welcome all 3 of you leading into this panel discussion. It's a pleasure. The Bahamas became last week one of the first destinations to reopen. So I will kick it off with Vernice Joaquin to tell us what the new travel experience looks like. I haven't been out to the airport Bernice, since on lockdown. What does it look like?
Bernice, you're self-muted. You can click the unmute button, Bernice.
Okay,
There we go.
better?
There you go.
Good, thank you. Well, thank you, Donnell, for inviting me to be a part of this dynamic panel. I appreciate it very much. So what I wanted to say is that all of us can remember back in 2001 when some dramatic events happened that changed travel and tourism forever. You know, we recognized right away that that period was one where, as you travel through airports, it was a very high touch experience because of the risk of terrorism. Everybody traveling through had to be, you know, either their person or their belongings had to be touched in order to uncover what the risk might be, explosive materials and so on. So here we are with this crisis in 2020 where everything is going to be touchless. Nobody wants to be touched. Nobody wants screeners to touch their belongings. So the airport environment has had to evolve and really to literally pivot to Therese's point in about 3 months. You know, some of the things we've been wanting to do for a little while now with biometrics and what have you to really do facial recognition and all those kinds of things have become so much more important today. So the experience now in airports is really moving rapidly towards being a touchless experience. So even as you are screened by security officers, you don't want them to touch you, so they have to use a wand if the walk-through device beeps. As they enter, before they even check in for their flight, they've checked in at home. You're encouraging them to check in digitally. You're encouraging them to print their bag tag at home so that they can attach it to their bag and just drop the bag off so that it limits their need to interact with any human beings. But what we've also done at the airport is, and most airports have done this by now, I suspect, certainly we've done it at LPIA, where we've installed plexiglass barriers so that people do not have to engage face-to-face with ticket agents and so on, security agents and what have you. So moving in that direction of a touchless experience where you can check yourself in, you can check your bag in, you move through security, you show your pass to the officer. They don't have to take it from you. They ask you to hold it while they review it to verify. You get in, you put your own items in the bin, you walk through the detector, and if it beeps, they use a wand so that there's some extension of their arm to check you to see what is causing the beep. So you get through that process. Everything's sanitized. You're using hand sanitizer, like it's going out of style, but it's an essential part of the process now. So those stations are everywhere for you. You go through security. In our case, you go through pre-clearance. Again, it's a very touchless experience, but to the extent that you have to use one of our kiosks and you have to, put your passport, slide your passport in order for it to be read, and you press the buttons. I have staff there who are there to wipe it down for you right away before the next person has to use it. And so all of the sanitization processes are evident. And people actually, as they travel through, they really appreciate it because it makes them feel that you've considered what things might make them more at risk, and you've found a way to address it. So they take comfort in knowing that you've actually considered it and you've responded, you've provided the processes and procedures and the protocols that make them feel safe. So then they get through that experience, they go into the food court area or they go to the hold rooms. Food courts have been thinned out in terms of seats removed, tables removed to provide for social distancing. We have social distancing markers everywhere where queues could in fact occur. We're close to implementing a system now where you don't have to even see anybody. It's a process called grab and go, where you can order your food and grab it, pick it up and go to your seat. So you go to the hold room and we've marked certain seats for you to, again, observe social distancing. So you do that, you get up, it's time to board, and the airlines are boarding you in small clusters so that, again, social distancing can be observed and you don't have crowding at the gates. Then you get on your plane and you go on your merry way. So the whole experience is a touchless experience. It's really intended to minimize actual contact with other people and to allow you to feel as though the airport has considered what matters to you in terms of keeping you and your family safe as you move through the airport. And it's been working very well for us. We've gotten lots of significant feedback to the fact that people feel as though we've actually thought this through. And it's in keeping with other airports, other best practices, guidance from the World Health Organization, CDC, PAHO, CARFA, the alphabet soup that is the medical community. But it's been working really well for us.
Okay, excellent. You, in one question, you answered everything about safety, the new experience, because we typically in the past would have thought about security only
Correct.
as safety, but now it's a whole different ball game. So thank you very much for that. So I have a few questions for Joy, and you are in charge at a very, very serious time in this country. So I would like to find out from you, what are the potential benefits for the Bahamas and the Caribbean destination, since we're speaking in general about the Caribbean as well, as they reframe tourism to derive better benefits post-COVID-19?
You're self-muted. You can just click the unmute button, Joy. The little microphone button. Okay, there you go. Click it one more time. There you go.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that. Thank you, Darnell. Thank you for the invitation to be a part of this panel. It is wonderful connecting with women that I have known for many, many years. And I see Rosa. It's a pleasure, Rosa, seeing you, my counterpart in Cayman, and just to see your smile too, but to everyone here, thank you very much. I think Bernice said it, and I'm sure we all will. Therese said so much in her remarks, and she encapsulated so much that I think all of us who are involved with tourism at this time feel. One of the things, to answer your question specifically, I do want to state though, I think for the Caribbean region, there is a light at the end of the tunnel for us. People have been locked down. We know that there is an appetite for travel and tourism. I'm amazed constantly, in fact, at research and the data coming out. In fact, recent data from our source market showed that 75 to 83% of all respondents to a survey said that they were ready to travel again, but they wanted to go. Their number one concern, health and safety. Bernice articulated very well what the airports are doing, and I think as long as destinations can demonstrate what they are doing on the ground and reassure the traveling public now that we have taken health and safety and the protocols and the standards and the processes, we've taken them seriously, we have put them in place. In terms of the Bahamas and the Caribbean generally, we do know data is also telling us people just want to get away. They're looking for relaxation. They want to rejuvenate. So what Tebby did at the beginning, that felt so good. And I understand now why people want to do it. We just want to get away from the stress of the COVID environment. Beaches have played a key part in that. And I think in our region, that's something that we offer. We always knew we had it, but this is a time that we have an opportunity to maximize upon it, because as a region, we can offer the things that people are looking for, getting away off the beaten track, away from the crowds. Issues of over-tourism was never an issue for us in our region. And again, up to us to capitalize on it. A number of things, even one of the things Therese said, and I just want to hit it on it again, the fact that we have managed COVID-19 so well as a region. The world is looking at it, taking note, and saying this is a place that they feel that they would want to visit. And so I am encouraged. I'm encouraged by what we're seeing in the future. There is optimism. As I said, there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's been a long road to get to this point, but by following all the best practices, putting those processes in place, I do believe that there's a bright future, as there has been after every crisis, even pandemics, for the tourism sector. It is a resilient sector.
Thank you. I guess this is a question I have to ask, as some people in the country and in other countries in the region may be asking, why is the Bahamas and the Caribbean opening up to travel and tourism at this time, especially if one considers what is happening in the US with the rise in cases? And then my second question, Joy, would be, why are we not seeing tourists arrive from other regions?
Gosh, really questions that are spot on in terms of the conversations that are taking place in the marketplace, and certainly in the Bahamas. Everyone is asking, why are we opening up, knowing that our number one source market, and in fact where most of our airlift is coming from currently, is the United States of America. It's already been said, but it has to be stressed. We have been dealing with a dual crisis. You've had a public health crisis that's shut down the entire world. We've not seen anything like it, unprecedented. As a result of that public health crisis, we have been faced, and all of us in this region, with an economic crisis, the likes of which we've never seen before. Governments are wrestling with how they're going to pay their bills. Companies have laid off people, and everyone is now making very difficult decisions. People are being laid off. People need to get back to work. If you have not worked for 4 months and fed your families, you don't know the pain. You're saying a public health crisis. I'm dealing with a crisis in my own home, in my own situation. And so I think for many governments, they've had to look at this and look at a balancing act, trying to balance both. And certainly in the Bahamas, I know one of the things that we said in opening up the economy, opening up our borders, is that the balance has to center around ensuring that public health safety concerns are met and doing everything possible that we can. I've learned this and I love this, so I'm borrowing this quote. We won't eliminate COVID-19. It's with us now forever, but how do we mitigate against it? And that's putting in place those processes and procedures. So in the Bahamas, like many countries in the region and around the world, we've got a health visa application that people now must fill in and submit online. I'm quite impressed with it. I know I'm a Bahamian, but I'm proud of what our health officials have put in place, because it looks at algorithms and risk stratification. So it's not just filling in a form and saying this is contact tracing. It goes much deeper than that. That, coupled with the fact that people will upload an RT, PCR, COVID-19 negative test before they can get entry to the Bahamas, means that we are trying to balance public health and safety with opening the economy. But we've got to get the economy going. We're grappling with a dual crisis, and we've got to get money back into the public treasury.
Yeah. Thank you. Understood. And then now, so switching over the experience to the Cayman Islands, Rosa, can you tell us what types of changes that you and adjustments that are being made to emerge in a more sustainable and prosperous way for the entire economy?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Darnell. It's a pleasure to meet everyone. Hi, Joy. Thank you for the question. I think the key to all aspects of this experience has been communication, having the right information at the right time. But what we have seen is a transition to the benefit being more of a locally sourced economy. So our borders are closed in Cayman. Businesses have had to adapt. They've had to, as our keynote speaker mentioned, technology. They've had to embrace technology, and we've had to get really, really creative and crafty about how we pivot the thought behind our businesses. Coupled with that is the sustainable aspect of the Cayman Islands has a very large import level of all things because we don't have a sustained, let's say, agriculture and other sources of things that you need to conduct business. But what we've seen is that there's a transition to locally sourced food. Obviously, there's been a food crisis, whether that's meat or just general produce and fruits and vegetables. What I've seen is a clear opportunity for local farmers to capture more of that agriculture market and truly know where your food is being sourced. So the farm to table being closed off to the outside world. Yes, we've still had imports, but persons have now started to make better choices. And that has benefited those that, those farmers and those purveyors that have that locally produced, whether it's meat, food, fruit, vegetables, and really being able to celebrate what's grown at home. I think that there's also an opportunity for us to transition a lot more Caymanians to tourism. So our borders closed. We also have a large expat population that work in tourism, and they have been repatriated to their homes. So we're now looking at what is the clear opportunity here for our people to penetrate the tourism industry when we do reopen our borders. That's really important for us that gain is increased on the Caymanian side. You see the sign behind me. I don't know which way am I going. This way or this way? This way. No, this way. Caymanian. I can't get it right. That sign. This sign. Oh, I don't know which way to point. Anyway. I'm a proud Caymanian, but I just don't know which way this webcam works. But when we think about the number of persons that have left our islands and those that remain and looking at unemployment, we have unemployment tourism employees, but we also have persons who may have considered tourism before, may have dabbled with the idea of starting a small business. The service-based businesses have boomed in COVID because we've had to bring product or service to where we are, where that consumer is because of the lockdown. Now persons are seeing, in the Caribbean, maybe we were a little bit lagged behind the whole online commerce. We got thrust fully into it. So I see clear opportunities there for small businesses, for persons who'd like a hospitality career. It is their opportunity to grow. And then just to have a healthier lifestyle with knowing where your food comes from.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Food for thought, I guess, for all of the countries in the region in terms of the number replacing. Almost, it's like you're considering replacing the expat numbers in the Cayman with Caymanians who may not have considered before. So excellent. How are you driving new linkages to make post-COVID tourism a uniquely Cayman experience? How are you doing that?
And your two questions are interlinked, obviously. And I want to talk a little bit more about that human element because it's really important. One, with COVID, it has impacted our daily lives. It has impacted person's ability to earn in tourism. It has created vulnerability and have persons saying, okay, how could I have safeguarded myself better? So there's an opportunity in all of our countries to retool and upskill our human capital, our talent pool, and also be able to give business owners better ways of doing business and also embracing new ways rather than getting stuck in traditional methods. And that's where businesses have gotten caught out. They have been slow to pivot because maybe they were okay with just being brick and mortar, very traditional. And those that had a tech first or digital first perspective just thrived a little bit better during this period. So being able to upskill and retool and build the capacity in terms of the businesses that serve our industry, and also particularly and most importantly, the people that work in tourism.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Rosa, and thank you, ladies. I'll turn it back over to Melissa as we continue. Do we have questions?
Yes, we have a few minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and take a couple questions we've gotten from the audience, ladies. Well, one of the issues that's come up several times is the issue of capacity. And Vernice, you started off telling us about all of these changes you've made at the airport. What does that mean in terms of the capacity of the Bahamas to receive the numbers of passengers that they could in the past?
Well, starting on July 1, when we were able to open for international commercial traffic, the numbers of passengers have been pretty low by comparison with the same time last year, for example. So that has allowed us really to manage the numbers very, very well in the space. And as each day went by, the numbers started to slowly creep up. And I expect that by the end of the month, and certainly into August, that the numbers will be, even higher, although probably still considerably below last year, but getting better. So I think this sort of slow start has been helpful, if only to help us to understand exactly what is working in the airport and what might prove to provide points of stress as the numbers grow, because certainly social distancing will become more of a challenge. If there's a bit of a lineup, particularly in the check-in hall, do we have to then put in social distancing markers on the outside so people start to queue outside? What happens if the weather doesn't cooperate? So all of these are the kinds of considerations that keep me up at night. It's a nice problem to have, that our numbers would be so strong that we would have that kind of a capacity issue. But it's something that I have to address clearly, because terminals are have a finite footprint unless you plan to incur more debt to expand your physical facility, and everything would suggest that is just not sensible today, because you want to some extent move people through your facilities seamlessly, quickly, efficiently, and you don't want them to sit for inordinate periods of time. You want them moving about, shopping and doing other things. So we have to look at how the numbers ramp up and how we manage those increasing numbers, bearing in mind the need for social distancing in particular. Everybody coming through our airport has to wear a mask. As I mentioned before, we have lots of hand sanitizing stations, obviously the restrooms where people can wash their hands and so on. But as the numbers grow, being able to impose social distancing requirements in hold rooms, for example, is going to be challenging. And, other, queue points where people, if the line gets sufficient that it has to snake outside, then, do we put in coverings of some sort to allow that to happen? All of these are things that we're actively thinking about and we'll have to address as the need arises. But certainly any airport that is not thinking about how they manage in this new health safety environment, you're gonna miss an opportunity to get ahead of it. So I'm sure that airports everywhere are considering how they manage the capacity given the new requirements to keep people from lining up and standing up and sitting on top of each other. You have to be very mindful of it, and people appreciate the efforts that airports are making to try to keep them safe in that facility.
Thank you, Bernice. We have time for just one more question. Joy and Rosa, I think we have about 2 minutes. So if you can try to briefly answer this. You had both spoken about the impact on workers right now and what the burden means for the individual families, for Caymanians in the case of Rosa, and in the case of Joy, you spoke as well about the burden on government as well as on fiscal balances. So if you could talk to us a little bit about when Therese spoke of retooling, how is retooling being taken into account right now so that this is a problem that we can look to end in as short term as possible?
Okay, Rosa, should I go? I'll go first. Just quickly, well, retooling for re-entry into the tourism sector very quickly. In the Bahamas, we've had a very robust tourism readiness and recovery plan that we put in place that established protocols, processes for returning back to the sector. A part of that was training, and we've trained to date over 8,200 people, with more coming on board in what the new normal will look like. So that's retooling to return back to the sector. I think if we're looking beyond that, Therese mentioned it, and it is so true. Technology has just taken over the space over the last few months. Every single person, their technology skills have improved dramatically. We are using Zoom, WebEx, a new system with you today, using it for teaching, for connecting with our offices. So I think this has been part of the just natural evolution and process of the time that we're living in, that people have upskilled their own skill sets, and that's going to be critical for the new normal moving forward.
Yeah, and in Cayman, we've offered stipends to our displaced tourism employees, $1,000 a month for 3 months to help them with their personal bills and just to live. Also, we have a School of Hospitality Studies, and we're looking to expand short-term training programs to be able to be ready for when we open our borders.
Thank you so much, ladies. That's all we have time for right now. Okay, so now I'm going to bring on our next speaker, and I'm going to just ask you as I introduce her if you'd like to take a screenshot. The last session we had several people writing and asking for her contact information. So I've gone ahead and included that. You should be able to see that on your screen. And our final speaker this afternoon is Dr. Deandra Smith, who's joining us to share her insights as a licensed and practicing psychologist on how to juggle the emotional and mental challenges that come with the COVID era. Deandra is going to take us deeper into dealing with loss today and starting over in these uncertain times. So Deandra, you can go ahead and unmute your mic and share your camera.
Hi, everyone. I want to say thank you so much to Donnell for inviting me back to be a part of such an amazing platform. And I want to say thank you to all the amazing female professionals that have been here on this platform that have shared so much of your knowledge and just wealth of information with us. And so I'm delighted to share on this topic, a topic that doesn't seem to bring so much excitement, rightfully so, when we talk about grief and loss. And you know, when I was asked to kind of provide some light-hearted conversation to this topic, it kind of stuck me a little bit, because I'm like, this isn't really a topic that you might think in a lighthearted way. But I hope that by the end of this conversation, it will push or influence someone to be able to reflect on their own experience and to be able to possibly rethink about some of the experiences that you've had during this time. So when we discuss this idea of grief and loss, we most typically associate these terms with, let's say, passing of a loved one. Um, in the climate that we're in right now with this pandemic, we've heard so much of the unfortunate passing of people that we might have known, colleagues, friends, and so on and so forth. But we've also heard about the loss of jobs, the loss of income, the loss of so many other tangible things. And it's very easy, I believe, sometimes to only focus on these things when we talk about loss. But there are those things that we might not be able to touch, those things that might seem a little bit intangible. When we think about the loss of freedom, we think about the loss of choice, we think about the loss of connection, interaction, the adjustments that we've had to take in relationships. Have you been able to ask yourself or even think about the idea of those things being losses? We often forget, I believe, or ignore maybe the emotional and mental aspects of loss. And so, one of the things I wanted to talk about today is that there is no hierarchy when we talk about this idea of loss. So, a lot of times we use this word or these words, loss and grief, interchangeably. But I want to be very deliberate in how I use them today, because when we talk about the idea of loss, we're speaking of an experience. And when we talk about grief, that is actually the response to the idea of loss. So when it comes to loss, we know that it's there, it's real. But do we always know what it means to grieve? In our culture, and I would say this because it's very hard to generalize Caribbean culture, because there are so many intricacies within the Caribbean culture. But when I talk about Caribbean, I'm speaking from my personal experience of being a Bahamian woman. Now, as I grew up in the Bahamian culture, when we talked about grief, we talked about the idea of grieving. There was almost, how do I say, limited sensitivity to how long it should take someone to grieve, right? There was this expectancy that you had a loss, you gave yourself a minute, and then you snap back into normal life, right? You get back to what you're supposed to do. And sometimes there wasn't, as I mentioned, that sensitivity to maybe someone took a little bit longer or takes a little bit longer to get through or manage their experience of loss. And so one of the things I'm going to talk about today is how can we experience the grieving process, and how specific and individualized the idea of grieving should actually be. So somehow loss has become rated. We look at loss, as I mentioned earlier, on a hierarchy, somehow indicating that someone's level of loss is greater than somebody else's. But what if I told you that loss is loss? Would you believe me? So what if I told you that the college senior that was unable to walk across the stage to accept her degree experienced loss? What if I told you that the expectant mother that was unable to share the birth of her child with her partner experienced loss? What if I told you that the grandparent who has been unable to physically be in contact with her grandchild actually experienced loss? Would you believe that the church member that misses maybe fellowshipping with the saints has also experienced loss? In these examples, we can see that loss is relative. We all have individual things during this time that we have either missed, that we have longed for, that we have sacrificed, and somehow, some way, unfortunately, a lot of people have been made to feel that they don't have the right to grieve such things as loss. If maybe you didn't lose your job, or maybe You didn't lose a loved one. Somehow, some way, you have been made to feel as if you can't speak about loss. But I'm here to tell you today that there is no loss that is greater than anyone else's. Every experience of loss is valid as long as it's valid to you. It's really, really difficult sometimes to experience this idea of loss or even to grieve a loss when you do not feel that you have the right to grieve. Kubler-Ross is a well-known theorist, group of actually two philosophers that created the stages of grief. And I'm going to go through very briefly through these stages because I don't want this to turn into kind of a lecture, but I think it's important for us to identify what those stages are. And those 5 steps or those 5 stages of grief include denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And what that means is that an individual can experience any one of these stages while grieving. So when we talk about denial, you're denying that this thing that you have lost has an impact on you. Fine, no big deal. Okay, fine, I didn't get to graduate, so what? No big deal. A lot of people don't get to graduate a lot of times. Anger. Somehow, some way, you're very irritable. You're a lot more frustrated. You're snapping here and there, right? The idea of bargaining. Lord, if you just send me this job, I promise you I will never do this thing again. Somehow, some way believing that you are the cause of your loss. So you're bargaining to attempt to create some level of normalcy. Depression. Depression has a lot more to do with just sadness. I believe culturally, sometimes we misinterpret what depression really is. We assume a lot of times that depression typically only means sadness, but depression also includes limited or lack of concentration, ideas of hopelessness and worthlessness, losing pleasure or losing pleasure in things, losing motivation, right? All of these things are also included in depression. So maybe that's an experience that you've had. And then lastly, acceptance. Accepting that I've lost this thing and it hurt and it bothered me and it frustrated me, but I have the ability to move forward. I think culturally, and I can speak for myself as a Caribbean woman, there is this unspoken pressure to automatically jump to the stage of acceptance. You've lost something and somehow you don't have the right to go through those stages, right? But you have to kind of skip over those stages to get to acceptance because you have so much other things and so many other people and so many other responsibilities that are depending on you. And so because of that, you maybe never truly get to experience the grieving process. So here are some tips and some suggestions that I have when we talk about dealing with loss. Acknowledge what you've lost. What are you longing? What are you missing? What did you need during this time that you didn't get? What significance did this thing that you've lost bring to you? How important was it, maybe, for example, for you to attend your daughter's high school or college graduation? How important was it for you to be able to have the dream wedding that you didn't get to have, right? Number 3, recognize that it's okay to grieve your loss. No one has the right to place a timestamp on your grief other than you. Okay, that's really important because I think a lot of times people feel that they have the right to rush us through our grieving process. Oh, you should be over that by now. It's not that big of a deal, right? Again, no one has the right to place that timestamp other than you. Number 4, surround yourself with supportive systems. Supportive systems can be your family, can be your friends, can be colleagues. It can be groups of people that you know will empathize with you rather than sympathize. And that's a conversation for a whole nother time. But when we talk about empathy versus sympathy, sympathy sometimes or somehow can indicate pity, where empathy actually says that you're putting yourself, or you're attempting to put yourself in someone else's shoe. So you are saying that I want you to be able to heal in whatever way you need to heal, not in the way that I want you to heal. So you want to surround yourself with individuals that can empathize with you. I think I was on 5. 5, reframe your thinking. And what I mean by reframing your thinking is you want to maybe ask yourself some questions. Right now, what is within my control? I cannot control that there is a pandemic out there. I cannot control that I potentially lost my job. However, I can control my perspective and my outlook on losing my job. Another question, what do I have right now versus what I don't have? What do I have? I have my health. I have my book, and I'm just using it as an example. I have the ability to be able to read my favorite book. I have the ability to be able to see my grandchild through, FaceTime, through WhatsApp, or what have you. What do I have now? So when we talk about reframing your thinking, we're not typically just only talking about being optimistic. What we're talking about is focusing on, again, where is my locus of control? What is within my frame of control? Because if we focus on the things that we don't have, we will always feel defeated. We will always feel as if we do not have that level of mastery. When we feel that we are in control, we feel better. And so that's the focus. The focus is you want to reframe your thinking. And lastly, some of the ways to deal with loss, I'm an advocate for it because I represent this field. I always encourage people to seek support. Seek support, whether it comes from a therapist, whether it comes from a spiritual advisor, spiritual counselor, a family or friend, or what have you. Make sure that you can engage with support because it is important to have a non-judgmental, objective space where you can share about how you think, how you feel. Lastly, I want to remind you again, your thoughts, your feelings, those things that you have missed or those things that you have lost are valid. You have the right to grieve. I want to say thank you again for having me, Darnell. And I don't know if I have time for questions, but again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Deandra. Darnell, I'll go ahead and bring you back on.
Well done. Very, very, and very truly enjoyed that. And before we bring Tabby back on to close tonight's session, I just want to thank all of our panelists for educating us on how to reinvent ourselves and the tourism industry in this period of history. Our keynote speaker, Therese, is a phenomenal and active, moving depository of information on our region and all its industries. We thank her for sharing from the depths of her wealth of knowledge and expertise. Our panelists, Joy, Venice, and Rosa, are uniquely positioned to address the trajectory of tourism in the Bahamas and the Cayman Islands. We are grateful for their invaluable insights and contribution. Deandra is an amazing contributor to our series of summits, and she reminds us how to calm our anxieties and our fears, which is needed very much at this time. It is always refreshing to have our younger professionals engage in the conversations on any topic. Tabby is a gifted artist and is always inspiring us to connect with our better selves. Deandra and Tabby, we thank you. And finally, as we light a path for others, we naturally light our own way. Mary Ann Radmacher. I would invite you all to follow us on Facebook at Citadel Consultants Limited or Darnell Osborne on LinkedIn, and check us out on www.citadelconsultantslimited.com to find out about our upcoming events. We have some exciting events for the fall. Thank you. And Tabby, you can now share your mic and your camera to provide the closing for tonight's event.
Thank you all. This was truly such an uplifting and informative experience. I think that it's so important as we move forward as a community to have these outlets to learn and grow. And I wanted to do something a little different this round. I would love to play a song for us. And it's so interesting that, Darnell, your closing quote about being light and lighting the pathway for others. I wanted to close with a song by India.Arie, which is called I Am Light. And I think that as we move forward, just like Deandra said, it is so important to have a connection to your higher self, to know that there is power in vulnerability, and to know that emotions don't make us weak. We've been taught to be strong so often that we don't understand that our true power is actually in our vulnerability and our ability to connect to each other. So I just want everybody to close your eyes again, and I'm going to play this song by India.Arie. And I just want you to connect to your heartbeat, feel your heart beating. No judgment. You don't need to, no expectations. Just connect to this song. And as we go forward, remember that you are light. And the only way for darkness to be banished from this world is for light to shine. So just think about how you're going to shine your light. Here we go. I am light, I am light. I am light, I am light. I am light, I am light. I am not the things my family did. I am not the voices in my head. I am not the pieces of the brokenness inside. I am light. I am light. I am light. I am light. I am light, I am light. I am light, I am light. I'm not the mistakes that I have made, or any of the things that caused me pain. I am not the pieces of the dream I left behind. I am light. 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 I am not the skin on the outside. I am not my age. I am not my race. My soul inside is all light. Oh, light. Oh, light. Thank you to everyone. I hope that you have been inspired and that you go forward and cultivate a community and a legacy that you can be proud of. Namaste.